In the garage of a building, a gang of metahumans is preparing to eliminate Jack, the henchman who failed on the job. However, before they can do so, a vigilante known as Payback, dressed in a shirt with a cross symbol, appears on the scene and easily takes out the gunman. With only 2 of them left, Payback shoots at the criminals, but they protect themselves with a bulletproof vest. So the vigilante decides to drop his weapons and goes in for a direct confrontation using his fists. The henchman proves to be skilled in martial arts, and as well as throwing quick punches and kicks, he manages to pull out the vigilante's knife and hit him in the leg. Even so, Payback strikes back by disabling the guy's arm and knocking him to the ground, finishing him off. Now only one of the enemies remains, who appears to be a hybrid of human and beast. However, Payback knocks the creature down with a single punch, and finally uses his fingers to hit the hybrid in the eye. Seeing the whole gang eliminated, Jack thanks the vigilante for saving his life. However, the guy reveals that he actually came after him because Jack was responsible for eliminating his daughter. Without hesitation, Payback pulls out his gun, shoots the target in the head, and when the police arrive on the scene, he surrenders without resistance. All these events took place in the city of St. Louis, after it had been the target of a nuclear incident known as the Pulse, which destroyed homes and contaminated residents with radiation. However, those who managed to survive mutated, acquiring superhuman powers and abilities. It didn't take long for criminals to use this to their advantage, forcing the American government to institute security measures. The biggest of these was the construction of the maximum security prison San Tiburon, created to house criminals with superpowers. The prison is run by Warden Devlin, a corrupt supervisor who enjoys imprisoning the superpowered, whether they are criminals or not. One morning, Warden receives news that a new batch of prisoners is arriving, including Payback and a young driver called Diego Diaz. When they arrive at the prison, they are met by officers Danny and Liz Morales, led by Captain Jason Brody. During the inspection, the officers warn them that for the duration of their stay, they will be forced to wear a collar on their leg. Through it, a substance called Nully is applied, created to deactivate their special powers. What's more, if any of the prisoners make a fuss, they can also trigger the collar to hit them with an electric charge. Payback isn't intimidated by this, but the captain gives a little demonstration, activating the command on his tablet and knocking the prisoner out with an electric shock. After everything has been explained, the newcomers are taken to their cell, and the next morning they head for the prison yard. Despite having just arrived, Payback soon gets into trouble with Diamond Jim, one of the gang members he eliminated to capture Jeffrey. On discovering that the vigilante had eliminated his brother that night, Jim lunges at him, but Payback easily dodges and hits him with a punch. A fierce fight breaks out and Diego watches it all, wondering why the cops don't try to break up the fight. Then one of the prisoners, Gordon, also known as Lightning Rod, tells him that the cops only interfere if one of the prisoners tries to eliminate the other. The fight continues, and even with his powers inactive, Payback strikes his opponent, who strikes back with a punch to the nose. However, the vigilante uses the blood to draw a cross on his face, in the same shape as his costume. After that, he continues to attack the prisoner and threatens to eliminate him in front of everyone, but Officer Liz puts an end to it by electrocuting both of them and taking them to the hospital wing. With the fight over, Diego asks Gordon how he managed to survive so long in prison. The veteran sympathizes with the newcomer and teaches him the 4 main rules in San Tiburon. Always keep everything clean, mind your own business, don't look for trouble and never borrow anything from the inmates. Gordon also gives him an extra tip. Never tell him how many years he has left on his sentence. As Diego has only been sentenced to 5 years, if any of the life prisoners find out, he'll be in serious trouble. After learning about the prison rules, Diego also asks about the most dangerous prisoner in San Tiburon, called Julius Loeb. Thanks to his ability to control minds, Julius is kept in an isolated cell, which is constantly guarded by his right-hand man Darius. Gordon also says that if Nully ever stops working, Julius will be able to eliminate everyone in the prison easily. Nearby, in the prison office, Supervisor Warden sends one of his men to call Julius, as it's time for his rehabilitation hearing. Wearing a collar and an iron mask, the prisoner is left in a dark room, where a judge begins to interrogate him. He asks if Julius feels rehabilitated after years in prison, but he treats the hearing with disregard and offends the judge, saying he just wants to go back to his cell. As expected, his rehabilitation was deemed insufficient and he must remain in prison indefinitely. On leaving the courtroom, Julius is approached by Warden, who wants to make a deal with the prisoner before he retires and leaves the job to a new supervisor. Warden reveals that he organizes a secret fight club inside the prison, which serves as a source of extra income. However, once he leaves San Tiburon, All he will have left is his monthly pension payment, and he wants to live out the rest of his days in luxury and fortune. However, he recently found out about Julius's fortune, which is hidden in a bank that only the prisoner has access to. So his proposal is that Julius transfers all his money to Warden's account, and in return, he will be guaranteed a more comfortable stay in prison. However, if he refuses, the overseer will take him to the hospital wing to perform surgery on his brain, so that he loses all his powers. With no other choice, Julius agrees to the deal, but it will be some time before he has access to the account with the money. Warden then gives Julius until the day of his retirement to arrange everything, and if he tries to betray him, he will spend the rest of his sentence without powers. While the two of them talk, in the hospital wing, Dr. Isabel is looking after Payback when she receives a visit from Diego, who has been sent to clean up the place. Even though she's dealing with the most dangerous prisoners, the doctor turns out to be a kind woman who tries to treat everyone with dignity. Diego soon sympathizes with the doctor and reveals that his special power is to capture other people's emotions through a strong sense of empathy. Unlike the other prisoners, he doesn't pose a threat and has been unjustly imprisoned. Dr. Isabel takes pity on Diego and the two continue their conversation when the doctor is summoned to do Julius's medical inspection in another room. Once there, the doctor begins her assessment, but without her realizing it, Payback gets up from the gurney and goes to meet her. Seeing the doctor attending to one of the most dangerous villains who ever lived, he attacks her until she is unconscious and sets out to eliminate Julius. However, just as he was about to attack him, Diego appears in the room and stops him, advancing on Payback and immobilizing him. Thanks to this, one of the policemen shows up in time and takes Payback back to his cell. Diego's courageous act makes him popular with the prisoners, and at lunchtime, they show him respect by handing him their jellies. Shortly afterwards, Gordon also appears and congratulates his friend, saying that now no one will bother him anymore. Suddenly, Darius also hands Diego his jelly and calls him into the corridor, because Julius wants to talk to him. When he arrives in his cell, Julius thanks him for what he did at the hospital and promises to repay him, as long as he helps him again when the time is right. Diego isn't sure if it's a good idea to help the prison's most dangerous prisoner, but soon accepts the offer. Back at the prison office, Warden is organizing the preparations for his farewell, with the help of his secretary Felicia. Shortly afterwards, Captain Brody also shows up and the supervisor tells him about his plan to use Julius to get his fortune before he leaves office. Brody, who has had enough of the fights and corruption within the prison, doesn't approve of the idea and just leaves the room quietly. Felicia, meanwhile, is disgusted by her boss's attitude and says that if the authorities find out, he'll be in serious trouble. However, he doesn't care and says that he will need Felicia's help. He knows that the secretary wants to take over his job, so he shows her two envelopes. The first contains a letter of recommendation for Felicia to become the new supervisor. However, the other contains a series of accusations of insubordination against her, and will be used if the secretary doesn't help him. Despite noticing her boss's intentions, Felicia decides to accept the terms, because when she becomes supervisor, things will be different in San Tiburon. Another day passes and Gordon is called to a hearing, where he must prove that he has been rehabilitated. After serving 10 years of his life sentence, the prisoner says he has changed his ways and is ready to pass on what he has learned. Unfortunately, the judge doesn't believe him and says that of all the prisoners, he's the only one who hasn't stood out, for better or for worse. Upon hearing this, Gordon becomes enraged, saying that he just wants to be free and that he has already paid enough of his sentence. However, this moment of anger causes the assessor to deny his request for rehabilitation, keeping him in prison for a few more years. With no hope of getting his freedom, Gordon sits down at the canteen table, disappointed with the outcome of the hearing. Diego, who is now working in the kitchen, tries to cheer up his friend, but at the same moment, Darius comes over to the table and hands Gordon some kind of key. The prisoner soon realizes what it's for and believes it's part of some secret plan of Julius. Then, as soon as Diego returns to the kitchen, Gordon opens his jacket and uses the key to deactivate the collar on his leg. Now that he's free of Nully, he can use his powers once more, but first, Gordon goes to talk to Diego, thanking him for being such a good friend over the last few days. Diego doesn't understand why he's saying this, but soon afterwards, Gordon starts taunting the policeman, challenging him to a fight. The officer prepares to teach the prisoner a lesson, but Gordon pulls an electric cable from the lamp and hits him in the body, absorbing all the electricity. In doing so, the prison's generator is overloaded and the entire electrical system is compromised. With this energy absorbed, Gordon once again becomes the lightning rod and fires an electric charge at the policeman, who is instantly eliminated. The prisoner then escapes from the canteen, but as he has destroyed the generator, the prison cameras are deactivated. In addition, the officers are no longer able to activate the shock on the collars of the criminals, who decide to use this to their advantage. In the yard, Jim and his henchmen decide to have a rematch with Payback, but just as they're about to face him, the generator starts working again. As a result, the cops reconnect the restraining collars, electrocute the prisoners and take them back to their cells. Once the situation is under control, the officers discover that one of their colleagues in the canteen has been eliminated by Gordon's attack. They also believe that it was he who caused the power outage and report everything to Warden, who orders the officers to capture Gordon as soon as possible. In the meantime, Lightning Rod flees to the hospital wing, where he stares at the sunlight through the window, announcing that he will soon be free again. To his misfortune, Officer Morales appears in the room, knocks him to the floor with a punch and tells the supervisor that she has found the fugitive. Warden orders her to finish Gordon off as punishment for eliminating one of the police officers. Liz refuses, as she can't eliminate a prisoner, but the supervisor forces her to, and using her combat gloves, she begins to attack the prisoner's head until she has finished him off once and for all. The next day, Diego is mourning the loss of his friend when he receives a call from his wife. During the conversation, she tells him that she needs him back because she can't support the couple's daughter on her own. Diego says he's doing his best to serve the shortest time in prison, but his wife doesn't know how long she can wait for him. The call is interrupted by Officer Liz, who has come to take the prisoner to see Warden. Upon meeting him, the supervisor takes Diego to the solitary confinement corridor, where there is a special room that punishes prisoners in the worst possible way. Warden warns him that if the prisoner doesn't want to be the next to enter the room, he must reveal why Julius is so interested in him. The guy simply explains that he had helped him at the hospital, and that's why Julius offered his friendship. When he hears this, the supervisor warns him that from now on, Diego will have to pass on everything he finds out about Julius, otherwise he will be put in solitary confinement for a long time. Once again, Diego is forced to obey, and for the next few days, the prison routine continues as normal. Without anyone knowing, Julius continues with his mysterious plan, and one morning he sends one of his henchmen to deliver a tattoo needle to Payback's cell. Although he doesn't know who did it, the guy doesn't care and starts to tattoo himself in the shape of a cross. Afterwards, he goes to the courtyard to find Jim, but the guy says it's not time yet, but assures him that the two of them will settle their differences soon. It seems that Jim has been ordered not to cause any trouble for the time being, as something very important is about to happen. As for Diego, he tries to survive day after day in prison, but after Gordon has been eliminated, he decides to confront Julius. When he arrives in his cell, he asks him what his real intentions are and what he wants Diego to do. Julius simply tells the young man to be patient, and if all goes well, the two of them will be free by the end of the same week. This date coincides with Supervisor Warden's retirement, and Felicia is anxiously waiting to be chosen to take his place. However, she soon gets an unpleasant surprise when she finds out via email that Captain Brody is also in the running for the position. Furious, she goes to confront her supervisor about it, but Warden tells her that he's just giving the captain a chance to be promoted too. However, she doesn't believe him and suspects that Warden has done this for some mysterious reason. Captain Brody himself is taken by surprise by this news, but he doesn't take it too kindly. Even so, he intends to keep everything under control until his boss retires, so he goes to the yard and asks Jim to stay out of trouble on the supervisor's last day. The prisoner agrees, but as soon as the captain leaves, Jim tells his colleagues that he's just waiting for the opportunity to finish him off. However, they must continue to follow Julius's plan and wait for the right moment. Finally, the big day of Warden's farewell arrives, and on arriving at the prison, he sends for Captain Brody and Felicia. He says he's finally chosen his replacement, and to Felicia's disappointment, Brody is appointed as the new supervisor of San Tiburon. Knowing that she is the most qualified for the job, Felicia leaves the room disappointed, which only makes Brody even more uncomfortable about the promotion. However, Warden doesn't care and goes to Julius's cell to make him fulfill the agreement they made. The supervisor hands him a tablet with access to his bank account, so that the prisoner can transfer his entire fortune. Just then, in the prison yard, Payback returns to provoke Jim, but this time he accepts and the two prepare for another fight. Seeing that the two prisoners are fighting, Liz and Captain Brody try to activate the collar's electricity, but it doesn't work. At the same time, Julius activates the command on the tablet, but as well as transferring the money, he activates a command to hack into the prison's electrical system. Thanks to this, he manages to deactivate all the collars, turning off Nully and causing all the prisoners to regain their powers. When this happens, the prisoners start a prison riot, fighting each other and the police, who did their best to prevent total chaos. Nearby, in the hospital wing, Diego also regains his powers of empathy and begins to feel the emotions of all the prisoners. This overload makes Diego feel bad, but Dr. Isabel helps him stay calm, saying that she will need him to protect the patients in the hospital. Diego agrees, and together with the doctor and one of the security guards, they block the passage before any more prisoners show up. Back in Julius's cell, Felicia calls Warden, telling him that the prisoners have had their powers released because someone has hacked into the security system. The supervisor then tries to leave the cell to resolve the situation, but the door is locked from the outside. As well as deactivating the collars, Julius has also opened the electronic locks on the cells, freeing all the prisoners. The situation escalates rapidly and the prisoners cause total destruction wherever they go. With their abilities, which range from lasers to telekinetic powers and flamethrowers, they eliminate the security guards and their own cellmates. In the midst of this chaos, Diamond Jim, now with his powers active, takes on a monstrous form, with super strength and tougher skin. Even with his ability, Payback has trouble facing his enemy in hand-to-hand combat and is knocked to the ground. Jim is preparing to eliminate his opponent when he is attacked in the head by another prisoner. However, thanks to his stamina, he feels no pain and eliminates the prisoner with an attack to the neck, but this distraction allows Payback to escape. Nearby, Captain Brody and the rest of the police try to contain the prisoners and think of a way to reactivate the collars. He then asks for Felicia's help, who quickly comes up with the idea of restarting the generator, as this will restore command over the cameras in the collars, reactivating Nully. Brody decides to go to the generator room and do it alone, while his colleagues stay behind to stop the criminals. However, Jim sees the captain heading there and decides to follow him to settle the score. When they arrive at the generator room, Brody asks Felicia for more information, but her communicator is failing. To make matters worse, Jim has just arrived and is looking for the captain, who tries to hide behind the generator, but accidentally knocks over a wrench and gives away his location. Jim then goes after him, but Brody manages to hide and tries to escape. Despite his efforts, the prisoner finds him, and with nowhere to run, Brody decides to fight him, but his punches don't do him any damage. Before eliminating him, Jim reveals that the whole thing was planned by Julius, with the help of one of the prison officers. He believed that Brody was involved, but the captain is innocent, and after some thought, he realizes that his colleague Danny was in the generator room when it was deactivated. He then deduces that Danny was working for Julius and planted a mechanism to tamper with the security system. Now that he knows the whole truth, Brody tries to confront Jim, but he's too strong and starts to squeeze him. On the verge of losing his strength, the captain manages to break free, and using the wrench, he breaks one of the pipes in the room. As a result, the heated gas shoots into Jim's face, who screams in pain until he is eliminated once and for all. Finally, Brody seizes the chance and restarts the generator, thus regaining control over the prisoners. Despite this, Julius's plan continues as normal, and after telling his supervisor everything, he reveals that he still has one more card up his sleeve. Unbeknownst to anyone, Julius had a secret ability to transfer his consciousness into the bodies of other human beings. With this, he exchanges his mind with Warren's, who in a few seconds finds himself inhabiting Julius's body. With no time to react, Julius knocks him out with a punch, leaving him unconscious on the bed. Now that he has Warden's body, he orders the policeman to open the door and take the prisoner to be punished in solitary confinement. Shortly afterwards, Julius comes out of his cell and runs into Felicia, who says she has managed to resolve the situation and is sending the prisoners back to their cells. The supervisor is pleased with her performance and, as a reward, appoints her as the new supervisor of San Tiburon, in place of Brody. At last, the uprising has been brought under control, and in the courtyard, Payback is sitting on the bodies of several prisoners. He has finally managed to eliminate all the criminals with superpowers from the prison and shouts with satisfaction at his victory. In addition to him, Diego was also of great help in the uprising, having stayed with Dr. Isabel to protect the hospital wing. As a reward for his efforts, he has been transferred to an ordinary prison, where he will soon be released for good behavior. Diego then says goodbye to the doctor, and as he leaves, Officer Liz appears, informing him of Supervisor Warden's latest order. He asked the doctor to administer doses of medication to Julius, to keep him under control when he gets out of solitary confinement. The doctor finds the request suspicious, but is forced to obey, and with that she will eliminate the last trace of the real Julius's plan. Days later, Felicia finally takes over as supervisor, while Brody resigns, leaving the chaos of prison behind to spend more time with his family. Finally, Julius managed to escape and kept his promise to Diego, who is preparing to take the bus to his new prison. However, Julius still had one more promise to keep, and using Warden's body, he grants Darius parole. With that, the prisoner is released, and on his way out of prison, he meets Julius, who is waiting to take him by car. Without anyone suspecting it, the two prisoners leave, able to use their powers to once again rise in the world of crime. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.